Now, have you had any problems personally?
Within a 6-week period, my website was hacked, my car was stolen, I was hit with brass knuckles and blocked from my house, and I thought my jaw was broken, and I was scared half to death. Nobody would fly with me for about a year.
What do you mean nobody would?
They were afraid they were going to blow up the plane.
Greetings and thank you for joining us at inflation.us. Today I have Bill Murphy. He is an expert on precious metals manipulation. He runs the organization GATA.org, and he's even received personal threats on his life. He's had his vehicle stolen. He's been punched. The truth that he speaks to you today has upset some very powerful people. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Murphy.
Great to be here, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Sir, could you just tell our audience at inflation.us a little about GATA?
Well, we were formed in January of 1999 by Chris Powell, the editor of a daily newspaper in Connecticut, and myself to expose the manipulation and gold price suppression scheme of a bunch of bullion banks, J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs at the time, while they fled, and Deutsche Bank. And as time went by, we realized that there was more to it, and the fact that the Fed, the Treasury, the Bank of England were all involved, and it was a joint operation. And we've been at it for 12 years, and quite frankly, the stuff that we've learned over that time, it all hangs together and gets more strong as we mature.
Now, for people who don't trade commodity futures, who aren't familiar with this type of stuff, how exactly do banks manipulate precious metals?
Well, it's a bit complicated for what we can go into here, but let's just say, for example, the government, for example, will all of a sudden flood the market with gold, which adds to the supply and forces down the price. And then in concerted action, J.P. Morgan, for example, and we testified this in front of the CFTC, will signal other traders and just start bombing the silver market, and or just overwhelm the speculative longs or traders that think the market's going to go up. And if they create a panic in the market, and people are forced out because they're afraid of losing all their money. And this has been going on since mid-'90s, and especially since we got involved in 1999.
Now, do the banks do this with other commodities, or do they do it with sugar and copper?
Well, I'm not saying it's never done, but I can only speak about what we know, and this is the reason for it. I mean, everyone used to hear about Robert Rubin all the time talking about the strong dollar policy. Well, the strong dollar policy was to keep our interest rates lower than they would be, affect the dollar, our financial markets, and so on. Whatever happens, whenever the gold price screams, especially in your world, of it talking about inflation, that's what people scream about, inflation or the crisis. It's bad for Wall Street. It's bad for Washington. It's bad for the establishment business. So it's in their interest, they feel, to keep the gold price suppressed as much as possible. Now, of course, to do that, since silver is money too, like gold is, they had to bring silver into the equation, because otherwise it would have been too much of an anomaly. And that's what our 12 years of evidence all shows. The good news is, and we can get into it, this price suppression scheme is falling apart.
Yeah, so that's a great question. How much longer do you think they can keep this up?
Well, here's a good one, again, for your listeners. When you talk about inflation, people say, gold stinks. It would be $2,500 an ounce if it kept pace with inflation. And we raise our hands and say, yes, and we'll tell you why. And then, of course, we go into the GATA story. And the other thing we can say is, people say, gold's been in a 10-year bull market. How can you say it's a price suppression scheme when this goes up 10 years in a row? It's very simple. It's all they're doing is they're managing their retreat. They used to have, the central banks used to have 30,000 tons of gold reserves. Now they have well less than 15,000 tons. In other words, they've run out of ammunition to meet a surging supply-demand deficit. They're hitting the wall, and especially in silver, which can explode at any time now.
So yeah, a lot of people focus on supply, or they focus on inflation, but what your research has done and what you've been doing with GATA for the last 12 years is just the manipulation to the downside could actually cause the precious metals to explode to a fair market value.
Well, you nailed it. That's exactly what's happening, and it's a very exciting situation. And one thing we realize in doing so, the mainstream gold world and Planet Wall Street, as I call it, have all been working with the wrong supply-demand numbers, because they haven't accounted for the gold and silver using this price suppression scheme. And we knew 10 years ago what was going to occur. We probably have the best track record, certainly as good as anybody in the whole world, about what was to happen to gold and silver and why. We even stated so in a And January 31st, 2008, in a $264,000 full-page color ad in the Wall Street Journal, which people can check out at www.gada.org website. And we said, this is before the financial crisis, we said as a result of this price suppression scheme, catastrophe and disaster are coming. Before it all happened, nobody paid any attention to us. And we also talked back then about $3,000 to $5,000 gold when nothing has changed. That's where we're going.
Yeah, so you feel right now, without the pricing and quantitative easing and the bonds and everything that's going on, just the manipulation puts gold around $3,000?
No, I'm saying that's where the price I felt was going to have to go, is what we would say to clear the market. In other words, once the supply-demand, for the supply-demand numbers to fit together, because they're running out of supply, you're going to take a move up to $3,000 to $5,000 an ounce or so, somewhere around there, to slow down demand enough to meet supply. And of course, silver, you can pick a number on the upside.
Do you think the gold and silver ratio will get closer to that 15 to 1?
Oh, I can leave that to others, but yes, I think it's going to come way down because basically J.P. Morgan is in big trouble. They've sold silver they don't have. They've been found out. There's a big campaign on the internet. A lot of people are realizing now what GATA knows. We exposed it at the CFTC March 25th hearing. We brought in a whistleblower, Andrew McGuire, who showed his emails to the CFTC in which he told them exactly when Morgan was going to attack, and they did. And still the CFTC does nothing. There's only one guy there, a fellow named Commissioner Bart Chilton, who's like a modern-day Elliot Ness, who's trying to do something about this, but the rest of them are worthless.
Yeah, we've been following that with you guys since earlier this year. It's a very interesting story, and everybody's very thankful for you getting that meeting at the CFTC. How do you feel about the Buy Silver Crash JP Morgan campaign? Do you think that is a realistic solution?
Well, it's funny. I got word of an email this morning that one of the top economic newspapers in Israel is talking about it. I mean, what Max Kaiser has done here in his efforts, which I applaud, has a lot of resonance, and it's picking up. And the answer is, I think, yes. But most importantly, that's a big deal. But all you need right now is one billionaire to step up and say, "I'll take what else is left." Right now, we're hearing all sorts of stories. You cannot get a lot of people can't get the delivery of the silver they've ordered. There's one story after another creeping up. So I would expect silver to explode sometime, and the bad guys, as we call them, they don't want silver above 30, and they're trying to keep gold below 14.20, but it will not work.
Yeah, all research that you do when it comes to manipulation, it seems like all roads end up leading to something to do with JP Morgan. Can you just kind of expand a little bit on why is JP Morgan involved in this so heavily? What is their role with the U.S. government? It seems like no matter what we do, what we research, it just always ends up at JP Morgan's front door.
It's the Fed's bank. It's that simple. J.P. Morgan is known by even people that don't follow us, but it's the Fed's bank. And as a matter of fact, the Treasury's bank has been Goldman Sachs. What, 18 zillion Goldman Sachs employees work for the U.S. Treasury? And of course, that's where they get their inside information flows. If people looked at what really was going on, which we have done in gold, and elsewhere, it's one scandal after another. But of course, scandals, they never really people believe them until they blow up, like a Madoff, Enron. There were scandals all the time. Everyone thought they were so great. There were scandals. Until it blew up, nobody wanted to pay attention to the whistleblowers.
Yeah, so we don't know what's going to blow up the currency. It could be this manipulation story. It could be the banks getting overwhelmed. It could be Russia or China. There's so many things that could collapse the U.S. currency. I wanted to see if you had any thoughts on what you think was going to happen over the next year as far as the U.S. dollar and gold.
Well, first of all, it's interesting that Bernanke comes out on 60 Minutes and says they're not printing money, but they're buying bonds to get the interest rates down, and that's really what they're doing, and he made that very succinctly. So, but what has happened since his presentation on Sunday is the yields are starting to skyrocket in the Treasury market. It's backfiring, and I think what people are realizing, that really what the U.S. government is doing in terms of monetizing things, is printing money. And it's going to have its effect in markets. And finally, the bond vigilantes are waking up and saying no mas. And we know the Chinese already are encouraging, which they own so much of our debt. They're encouraging all their people, not all, but whoever can afford it, to buy gold and silver. The government's buying. People are realizing if this is what's going to happen, not just in the United States but elsewhere, the debasement of currencies, that the place to go is gold and silver, and it's happening. Right now, the gold cartel, as we call them, is petrified of this, and that's why they raided the market this week for no reason. You had look, again, your stuff, the CRB is near its highs. The bond market realized what it was doing, and it was in such a panic, they bombed gold and silver. Yeah, but it won't work. You'll see gold and silver go right back up again. It's like keeping a rubber ball underwater.
Now, for people who are just learning about this manipulation, what's something they can do to learn more about it, to understand it, as well as do something to take action?
Well, obviously, my little prejudice here. You go to www.gada.org. My colleague Chris Powell does a great job with that. And I write a commentary every day. www.lemetropolcafe.com, LEMETROPOLECAFE.com, and people can sign up for a 2-week free trial and see if it's worth it for them.
All right, Mr. Murphy, I appreciate you coming on the show with us today and joining us at the National Inflation Association. Again, we're big fans of your work, and we thank you so much for everything you've been doing for everybody who is invested in the metals. And it is an advantage to us because they have been manipulating the metals down. But certainly your work to allow the free market to set the price is something that we can all thank you for very much.
Well, we want to thank you. Congratulate you for your burst onto the scene here this past year. It was quite exceptional, so congrats.
Thank you very much, sir. You have a great day.
Bye-bye.